you really want players to understand their own game, their own strengths and weaknesses and how they build a game plan around them. The timing of when you make an intervention as a coach is a really important. I think mindset is huge. Confidence, having a clear game plan in the middle, and ultimately, look, batting is about scoring runs, and there are loads of different ways to bat. And there've been some very ugly-looking batters who are very effective, and there've been some beautiful-looking players who don't score as many runs. It is about scoring runs. So build your game around knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are. Back to the key basics: play late. Try and play as straight as you can. And as I tell every batter I work with, certainly on the slightly longer formats of the game, give yourself half an hour. Yeah, positivity isn't aggression. Positivity is exactly what you said. It's intent. And what you're finding at the moment around the world, that a lot of the top players, and Babar Azam, Steve Smith, Kane Williamson, Ben Stokes, I mean, you could run a list of them. Most of them, if not all of them, at ball release, their head is close to off stump. It's middle and off stump. Everything on the front foot is head first, right? Everything is head going to the line of the ball. Whatever line that ball finishes on, my head goes. Now the back foot is different. The back foot is always the back foot going first. And once players get that in their head, that it's always head first on the front foot, but it's always the back foot first on the back foot, then you get into lovely balanced position.
Cricket Life Stories with me, Neil Kagram. Today we're joined by Toby Radford. Toby, how are things going since we last spoke?
Very well, good to see you. Yeah, pandemic is hopefully coming to the back end. Everyone's getting vaccinated, so all being well, sort of a positive thing, I think, as we come out of the back end of it.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So in this chat, we're going to talk about batting, some of your main tips on the subject. Before we get into it, do you want to talk about what's been going on the last few months, your role with Bangladesh cricket, first of all?
Yeah, I mean, my role with Bangladesh cricket is head of high performance. So it's basically running their sort of A team, the team that sits under the international side. Very talented group, got about 24, 25 players. Most of them were in the under-19 team that won the last World Cup. So it's a very strong group, especially on the batting and the spin bowling, as you can imagine out there. So yes, I've been out there, run some camps with them. Pleased in recent weeks and months to see that a few of those guys have gone on and done well in the international teams and starting to win some matches with them. So really good. I think for Bangladesh cricket, I think the future looks really positive because they do have this wealth of good young talent to work with.
And then if anyone wants to actually get involved with you in terms of some personal coaching, you've got your website, you've got your online business. Do you want to just share that as well?
Yeah, well, when I'm not abroad with Bangladesh, I'm back in the UK. I'm based in Cardiff, and I do a lot of private coaching. So I have a lot of batsmen sort of come to me from different parts of the country at different levels, really. Academy players, county players, even international players. So a real mix of players. So a lot of that, my time is spent doing that. And also, when the pandemic first hit, I introduced to my coaching website this idea of sort of online coaching and analysis of batters' videos. And it really came about because when I was in my job with the West Indies, in between series, the players would go back to the Caribbean, I'd come back here to Cardiff, and I thought, well, how can I sort of keep in touch with them in those periods? And what would happen is the players would go to their nets, they would send me little clips of them batting on WhatsApp, which is a great tool, really. I'd then analyze that, maybe make some drawings, put some notes together, have a little call like this, have a Zoom chat with them. And when the pandemic hit, obviously players around the world couldn't get to their nets, they couldn't get to their coaches. And I thought, I can actually offer this up as a service to players of all abilities around the world. And that's what we did. And I called it the batting booth. It's on my website, tobyradfordcricketcoaching.com. So people access it there. And I literally get videos in now, New Zealand, India, Pakistan. I get them from everywhere. I'll get them in, I'll analyze them, make some sort of little drawings of, strengths and weaknesses, give them some potential drills that they can do to help them improve their game. And then, as I say, have a chat with them as well, like this. So it's, it's a nice service to offer, I think. And they're basically getting the same service that the international players would have got when I was with the West Indies.
Yeah, you've got a great system in place. We'll put all the links in the description below of this video. So whoever is watching this, please do check it out. But Toby, let's get into this discussion about batting and a high level question. What are your main philosophies when it comes to coaching batting?
I think my philosophy as a coach per se, not just with batting, I think is that the players in many ways become their own coach. I think, you really want players to understand their own game, their own strengths and weaknesses and how they build a game plan around that. So I think the days of coaching where you're just giving instruction are long gone, because you don't want a player when things aren't going right to come and have to keep knocking on your door and tell, well, what do I do? So I think it's giving them, when you're helping them develop their game, you're giving them understanding why things work, why things don't work. Because when you're not there, you want them to be able to put them right. And of course, when a batsman walks over the white line out to the middle, he's on his own. So he has to be able, and she has to be able to think on their feet. So for me, that's my big part of my coaching philosophy, is to get them to understand their game. I think that's the major thing for me.
Do you think there is a big difference in the way batsmen are coached in different parts of the world? Obviously, you've coached at the highest level, international level, county cricket. What are the main differences that you've seen globally in different parts of the world?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think conditions obviously determine that. So if you look at Asian players, they tend to stand, and I know you want to talk a little bit about guards, and they tend to stand a little bit more leg side of the ball, just the way they're brought up. On the quicker surfaces, say in England, South Africa, Australia, players tend to stand a little bit further across, closer to the off stump. So guards for sure. Asian players brought up on slow turning wickets. They're very good with their wrists. They manipulate spin well. English players don't do that as well, because we're not brought up on those pitches. So we tend to play swing better, because that's what we are used to. We're front foot players. The Australians and the South Africans are more cuts and pulls, because they're brought up on quicker, bouncier wickets. So I think the players are a product of the environment and the conditions they're brought up in. And I think wherever you're coaching, you're working with that, but you're also trying to develop players that can go and perform in other parts of the world. So when I'm working with Bangladesh, I'm saying, look, we know you're good in Bangladesh and play well on slow pitches and you play spin well. But when we go and play against Australia, you've got to be able to stand up to Mitchell Starc bowling at 90 odd mile an hour around your head on a bouncy wicket in Perth. So we've got to practice for that. So it's all about developing the player to be able to perform in other parts of the world. And if you look at international cricket, there aren't many teams who perform as well away as they do at home. India, fantastic at home, but they struggle a bit more with the swinging ball. It's a test. England, very good against the swinging ball, struggle when it turns in India. So you're trying all the time as a coach to develop those bits where you're not brought up that way, and you want to improve those areas. Yeah.
Another big debate that I have seen in amongst commentators, etc., and I want to get your insight on it. So are you of the belief that a player should be continually taught the technical correctness of their game, or should they be able to almost have guidance from afar and just work it out from themselves? What are your philosophies on that?
Well, I think that the teaching and the learning is done in the early stages, isn't it? And it's coming back to that understanding. So, good technique is put in at the early ages, whether it's, 7, 8, 9, and you're developing, playing on the front and back foot, a good solid defense. You've got your shots, your scoring options. That comes at a very early age. Now, when that's built in, all the top players, then it's experience, and they just alter things as they develop their career. Their grip might change a bit. Their setup might change subtly. But the good basic technique should already be in place. I mean, that doesn't always happen, and sometimes you find players, as they go through the stages, little things creep in, and your job as a coach, when little habits creep in, and sometimes players don't feel them and know they're doing them, is your job is just to give that little bit of feedback. Say, look, do you realise that the bat's going a little bit behind your back, or your back foot sliding the wrong way? Little things that creep in. But I don't think the basics of the game have got to be done earlier. Get those in, and then it's just a case of letting players develop and work some things out as they go through.
When it comes to, again, you've worked at the highest level and things are scrutinized a lot. If a player does adjust their technique in between games, how difficult is that to implement it in a game situation? How many hours of repetition would they have to perform? What are your views, insights, and experiences on that?
It varies from player to player. Some players are able to make changes very quickly and do it in a way where they don't worry about it and they just make the adjustments. Some people panic a bit and then they overanalyze and worry about it. So you've almost got to know the individual, and you as an individual player have to know yourself. So I think the way that you deliver it to the player, you've got to know their personality and how they might respond. So if there's an issue that needs dealing with, occasionally I'll play it down if it's someone I know would worry about it. If it's someone who's quite laid back, you can be very honest and say, look, I think we need to sort this out, because you know they're not going to go away and it's going to affect them. The timing of when you make an intervention as a coach is a really important thing. You know, players might be scoring runs and they have an issue, and you might think, look, just leave them go. They're in good form. Their confidence is high. Just let them carry on. Obviously, if they're having a run of low scores and you know potentially what the issue is, then you've got to raise it. And you know, to answer your question in terms of how often you've got to hit the balls to put things right, I think it's a very individual thing. It's a very individual thing. You know, the bigger jobs are generally done out of season, but there are times in the middle of a series where somebody's struggling and you've just got to go and target the area that's causing the problem. And that might be, look, if it's a swinging ball, we've got to go out tomorrow, set up the bowling machine. Let's replicate Jimmy Anderson. Let's set it up for his pace and his angle, so that when you face Jimmy in the next test, you know, it's not guaranteed success, but you've got more chance of it coming off because you've really practiced specifically for what the challenge is that lies ahead. You know?
And then when it comes to the makeup of a skill set of a batsman, what percentage would you put mindset in that?
I think mindset is huge. Confidence, having a clear game plan. But, you know, you can have the best game plan in the world. If you haven't got a technique to carry it out, you're not going to get very far. So you need the basic technique, but you then clearly need a game plan to go and be effective in the middle. And ultimately, look, batting is about scoring runs. And there are loads of different ways to bat. And there've been some very ugly looking batters who are very effective. And there've been some beautiful looking players who don't score as many runs. It is about scoring runs. And ultimately people look in the book, don't they, years down the line, say, oh, this player averaged 50, he scored thousands of times. He must have been a top player. And this comes back again to knowing your game. If you know you don't play a good cover drive, don't play too many cover drives. You know, so build your game around knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are as well.
And then perhaps this is more a question for young players, club players. What should their mindset be and approach be when it comes to practice? Because obviously you do see that. I'm a club player myself. You go down to the nets every Wednesday and you just go in the nets, hit a few balls, go for a few beers. But then when you're not performing on the Saturday, what switch should you be making if to perform your game, to aid your game?
I think practice needs to have a purpose. I think in every opportunity that whenever you go to a net, it's an opportunity to improve your game. Now, that might be working on a specific aspect. It might be saying, look, I'm struggling against left arm spin. I'm going to set up my practice. Let's face a bit of spin and work on my game. So there may be a very specific element. You might know the team you're playing against next Saturday and the type of pitch you're going to play on. Right, I'm going to make my practice now. They've got a big, tall left armer. I'm going to practice. I'm going to get the bowling machine on left arm. It's going to swing in so that, again, when you come to your game on Saturday, you've given yourself the best chance for success because you've practiced the very angle, the line, the type of movement you're going to face on the Saturday. So I think very specific and practice with a purpose always. And I'm a big one. When somebody's game is in order, I'm always a big one for stretching them in practice. Make practice tough so that when you get out into the match, things will feel easier. You know, turn up the pace of the flinging. I fling from a bit closer sometimes. There have been times when we played England in the Caribbean a few years ago with the West Indies. You know, I was bowling off a short pitch, but I was polishing up the balls with shoe polish because I said, look, guys, Jimmy's going to swing the ball. Broad's going to swing the ball. Let's make practice difficult. So when you face him in the middle, hopefully he's going to be easier than my boot polished and shaped ball. You know, so make practice specific and make it difficult, I think.
And then something that, whether you're a professional, the best batsman in the world, or again, a young clubby, everyone goes through a low run of scores, that feeling that you can't even hit it off the square. As a coach, what would you be talking to that player about in terms of to assist them making that switch and kick them into getting a few scores?
I think the first thing is them understanding and appreciating that's the nature of the game. And you can be the world's best player. You can be Virat Kohli. He's had runs of low scores. Every player in the world who's ever played the game has had a run of low scores. So you're not unique. Don't feel that it makes you a bad player because the world's best have tough times. That's the nature of the game. Bowlers are there to get you out. And you're gonna make the odd mistake. They're going to bowl good balls. You're going to get bad decisions. You're going to play on bad pitches. All these things can happen. So first of all, accept that that can be the nature of the game. Look and learn. Are you getting out in the same way? Is there something to be learned from how you've been getting out? Is there a pattern? Are you getting out to the same type of bowler? Is it the same type of length, same type of shot? So, there's a learning to do. And I think, look, very much for me, it's about getting back to the key basics. Play late, try and play as straight as you can. And as I tell every batter I work with, certainly on the slightly longer formats of the game, give yourself half an hour. So when you go out to bat, right, you've got to be switched on for that first period. Batting generally always gets easier. The toughest bit is when you first walk out there. You don't know the pace of the wicket. You haven't really seen the bowler before. What's the ball doing? So be sharp that first half an hour. And I say to guys, if you bat for half an hour, you'll probably bat for 2.5 hours, 3 hours. You'll get yourself a score. You'll get the team a score. So that first period of just being positive. And I think if you go out with a positive mindset of what I'm looking to do, while your brain is thinking of a positive thing, it can't then be worrying about failing or having another low score or anxiety. You've given yourself a positive thing to think about. And I think that's the best way to go.
And when you mentioned positivity, is that aggressive nature, but aggressive in intent? So even when you're leaving the ball, aggressive, quick singles, would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely, yeah. Positivity isn't aggression. Positivity is exactly what you said. It's intent that everything you do, even when you're leaving the ball, I'm showing that I've judged the length. I'm getting into the ball. I'm moving my feet. I'm busy. And I'm showing that I'm sharp. You've got to be sharp early on, because if you're not sharp, often you're back in the pavilion before you realise it. Especially at the slightly higher levels, where it's the pace of the bowling, and you've just got to be on it from ball one. It will get easier from there, and you'll cash in later on in the day. That's the way to look at it.
What is the balance in between analysing the opposition and worrying about and looking at your own game?
I think you've got to be able to do both. I think you should have a good understanding of your own game, as I've already said. That should be fairly ingrained. You know your game, you know your strengths, you know your weaknesses. And I also believe, look, I think the world's best, even before they walk out to the middle, they know where their scoring options are. If A.B. de Villiers faces a good leg spinner, he's done it so many times before. He knows where his easy single is. He knows if he needs a boundary, where he's going to go for it. So that experience of a clear game plan. Now, for young players, you've got to work that out. So if you're facing a certain type of bowler, where's my least risk option for a single? Where's my least risk option for a boundary? And I think when you stick to that kind of, plan is already there. All you've got to go out and do is execute. You don't want to be thinking of what to do when you're out there. That's got to be pretty much done before you get out there. And then you just play the ball as you see fit into that game plan,
What would your main advice be for a young player perhaps suffering with nerves during the week of the game and then just about to go out to the middle?
I think anxiety is, everyone feels it. And I think we all get anxious, certainly waiting to bat. It's often a one chance game as a batter, and we know that. If we make one mistake, that's game over, can be. So I think, again, you've got to come back to this point of view. I'm not unique. Everybody feels nervous before they bat. So I think that should take a little bit of pressure off. And I would start to fill the brain more with the positive things. I'm going to have a routine before the game. I'm going to have my 5 or 10 minutes hitting balls. I'll do my top hand drills or whatever my little routine is before I go out to bat. So everything is filled with positivity. Where I'm going to, how I'm going to look to play today. I'm going to spend this first half an hour getting into the innings. And so I think fill it with positivity, accept that anxiety is a part of it. Breathing techniques, so good slow your breathing down. And what you'll find with a lot of the professional players is they'll have, while they're waiting to go into the bat, they'll have they'll have music on. They might have some calming music, and they'll have their iPod to listen to. So that can be something that just sort of calms the brain and gets you in a good frame of mind, ready to go out to bat.
And then a subject that's had a lot of attention, perhaps a lot in the UK, is about taking guard.
Yeah.
A lot of county players you see on TV, they're now moving on to off stump when they're taking guard. Yeah. What are your views on that kind of setup? I know every player's different, but what are your general views on that and trigger movements, etc. from a technical
point of view? It's look, it's all about where your head is at release of the ball. And what you're finding at the moment around the world, that a lot of the top players, and Babar Azam, Steve Smith, Kane Williamson, Ben Stokes, I mean, you could run a list of them. Most of them, if not all of them, at ball release, their head is close to off stump. It's middle and off stump at best. Now, two things with doing that. Two things that they do. Firstly, if they're in conditions like you get in England, green seamer, early season, big Duke's ball that can nip back in, they will adjust that so that the head that normally gets on off stump and gives them huge success around the world on quite flat pitches, they will maybe just come back a little bit with their guard to cater for the ball that moves in England. So, head becomes maybe more middle, early season in England. If the wicket is pretty flat, they will always be in and around middle and off stump. The second point is, and this is crucial for anyone who has their head close to off stump, at release of the ball, what the top players will do, they will align their head and their body weight back to the bowler's stumps. So a right-hander facing a right arm over bowler, he's a little bit open and he's lined up to the stumps and the body weight goes there. What they don't do is if the ball is released from the middle of the crease or wide of the crease, they don't go to the early part of the flight. Because if you start to get your head going to the early part of the flight and then it angles in, seams in, swings in, you're going to end up playing across the ball and you become an LBW candidate, right? So the two key things are you have to have your head going back at the stumps and watch. I talk to players about tracking the ball, but not going to the early part of flight. Track it and meet wherever the ball finishes. So if it angles in, you can then hit it back straight past the stumps. The problem is, and lesser players, they'll go early and then find they end up playing across the ball. And that's really the secret of playing any ball angling back.
And then for a young player, perhaps this is something that, it might be a slight generalization, but for a young player that cannot make the step up in levels, it might be due to the fact that they're facing the increased pace as they go through their ages, that inability to adapt and play off the back foot. Again, from a technical aspect, what advice would you give a young player?
Well, I think, again, from an early age, they've got to practice the short ball. And that can be done with tennis balls, incredibles, balls that if it hits you, it's not going to cause any pain or any fear or anxiety, but getting them used to the length and getting them used to the pace. So, you can come, when I was young, many, many years ago, I used to practice with my dad with a tennis ball with tape on it, like they do in Asia. And we had a little old marble floor near us in an old school. And my dad, off a close pitch, used to throw it short and it would skid. So you would kind of get used from an early age to playing on the back foot. So there's all kinds of ways, I think, with young players where you can use, as I say, tennis balls, tape ball, incredible, to get used to it. And then you're looking at the technique of the back foot. Now on the front foot, and if I had a pound for every time I say this to players, I'd be a millionaire, and I'm not. Everything on the front foot is head first, right? Everything is head going to the line of the ball. Whatever line that ball finishes on, my head goes. Now, the back foot is different. The back foot is always the back foot going first. And once players get that in their head, that it's always head first on the front foot, but it's always the back foot first on the back foot, then you get into lovely balanced positions and you can hit your cuts and your pulls and your punches nicely from your back foot. The problem is where players play on the back foot and they go head first and then they end up unbalanced and the bottom hand takes over and you lose that lovely control of the front side of the body. So head first, front foot, back foot first, back foot. And that's it really. And I think you can work that with, as I say, with drills, with tennis balls and incredible, etc.
And then your best tip for a young player, perhaps, again, struggling to pick a spinner, would you advise they pick it out of the hand off the pitch or another technique? Again, your insight on that.
Yeah, I mean, finger spin's not generally a problem, is it? Because with finger spinners, it's pretty easy. You're just waiting for the arm ball more than anything. It's a good quality wrist spinner that's got a well-disguised googly or flipper. That's much trickier. And I actually think the best way to learn isn't necessarily just facing it in the net, but getting somebody who bowls it to throw them and bowl them to you from a close range slowly. So you start to learn what you see from the hand, right? So obviously, with a leg spinner, you're seeing the ball coming at the side. With a googly, you're going to see more of this wrist. Now, what happens is if you get someone just to throw to you slowly, you'll start to pick it up and your brain starts to look for it. The top bowlers obviously bowl very quickly, so you haven't got a lot of time, but you can start to see that is, if you're seeing that, it's a googly. If I'm seeing that, it's a leg spinner, and you'll start to work out which way the ball's going to go. So that's always the way I do it with players. I break it down, then I go into a net situation. But before that, I'm just getting them used to seeing the different parts of the hand and the wrist.
And what, in your opinion, do all the great batsmen, batswomen, either in the modern day or past players, have in common from a technical aspect?
I think they all control the bat with the front side of the body. The top hand does all the work. The front shoulder, the top hand controls the bat. You don't see any world-class players who play only with the bottom hand. It's the top hand that controls it. They play late, so they play close to the body. They look to create a stable base. So whatever shot they're playing, forward or back, attack or defense, they try to play from a stable base, because if they're stable, the head can be still, and then they can create timing, and they can create control, and they can create power. So stable base, top hand, late and close to the body.
It's a fascinating subject. We can talk all day on it, but just to end on, what is your best piece of advice that you give a young player?
Young player, first thing is enjoy it. You've got to enjoy batting. I mean, so it's a lovely thing to do. There's nothing better than hitting a lovely shot off the middle of a bat and seeing the ball flow. Enjoy your batting. If you have tough times, you'll get through them. Keep learning, keep developing. I mean, I've been very lucky, I think, over the years to work with some top players, and I've loved the mindset. And I think back to someone like a Shiv Chanderpaul, who I was very fortunate to work. I mean, he was #1 in the world. He was always looking to get better. And I think have that open-mindedness to keep improving, because I do believe the best players are never satisfied. They're always pushing the bar, and that's why they're the best. They're always looking to just try and get that little bit better.
Toby, perfect. Thank you again for your time today, and all the best for the months ahead.
Good to chat to you, mate. Speak soon. Take care.
So Neil Cadgram, Cricket Love Stories, Toby Radford. Thank you.